Right, good evening. This is a really important conversation about the broadcast servicing bill. The government of India is planning to regulate this show on this platform, on this medium, which means it's working on a bill or a new law that will regulate the way you receive news on the internet. So if you're watching at home and you're used to, getting your news on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook or on Twitter, if you like to share the news and comment on it, if you follow a lot of influencers or if you're an influencer yourself, this law could change everything for you. Now, we've got a draft that we're looking at, but I must tell you, the law has not been publicly shared with all of us. So normally, when journalists actually talk about a draft law, we're downloading it from a government website. In this case, it hasn't been uploaded on any government website. It's leaked on the internet because the government has apparently only consulted the big guys and they haven't made it available to everyone. So we're looking at a draft that has leaked on the internet because it's not been made available to everybody. So we don't know if it's the real thing, it is a thing. And from what we're looking at, it does not look good. So, what we're doing this evening is we're having a conversation with people who've really taken the trouble to go through what this bill says. And it's drafted in the most confusing fashion, I must tell you. And we'll also answer questions because it can be life altering for many, many of us. Joining me right now, Apar Gupta, who is a lawyer and the co founder of the Internet Freedom Foundation, who dedicates a lot of time and energy to keeping the internet free on many levels. He joins us right now. Abhinandan Sekhri, the co-founder of News Laundry, will join us as we continue talking. But I'm glad to have Apar Gupta because really couldn't have had a better voice on this. Apar, good evening and thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure
Thank
to chat with you as always. Um, on the top of it, you've looked through the bill. Is it
Yes.
fair to say that it will be a massive blow to freedom of speech and the free press on the internet?
I think it's a very good way to put it, and I've written about it in an op-ed in the Hindu that it virtually amounts to a digital license raj for
Yes.
content creators and digital news platforms. So between both of them, I think a lot of the internet does reside. Our experiences, our interactions on the internet, uh, to a large extent by content creators or news or current affairs through digital news platforms.
Well, if I've understood this correctly, and I'm looking at this from two categories, right? Digital news and non news digital content. So if we look at
Yes.
digital news, everyone who writes a website, writes a blog, writes news on social media, puts out news on YouTube, will be regulated by this. And they all have to register with the government. And the government has given itself the power to reject a registration, which means what? That we won't be able to function if they don't like us.
Yes, that's correct. And if you look at the schedule of penalties in the leaked draft, the consequence of operating any kind of broadcasting service, so both digital news publishers as well as uh, content creators are both firstly classified as broadcasters. And then they are regulated by saying that you need to intimate us, you need to do XYZ. And if you don't register with us, then we can prosecute you with fines and even a term of imprisonment up to 2 years. So there's serious consequences, Faye. And
Hmm.
you're right, a digital news broadcaster has been defined very, very vaguely, very, very broadly, and it includes within itself any kind of person who broadcasts news and current affairs programs through an online paper, news portal, website, social media intermediary. So a lot of people may be thinking that, well, it'll only apply to Faye or somebody who has
Hmm.
a website called .com or has like a lot of people working there. Well, that's not completely true. A lot of people who are journalists from smaller towns, villages, they quite often just use a page on social media. And a lot of those communities, let's say in a smaller city, get the news from following a Facebook page or WhatsApp group. All of these are also now broadcasters, and it doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
audio visual or it's text. All of them need to register.
Abhinandan Sekhri joins us right now. He's co-founder of News Laundry. He's also one of the founding members of DigiPub, which is an association of digital publishers. Abhinandan, if this draft is the real thing, and if it does get passed by parliament, does that mean that all of the channels that people are used to watching on YouTube, including yours, all of the websites that people are used to reading their news on, will simply will change the way they're functioning? Will they be able to continue functioning? What is your assessment so far?
Well, I actually find it very unlikely this could go through because, I mean, there are just so many holes in it. I think it could be
Mm,
comfortably challenged in court, as many policy interventions of this government have been, and many haven't been, and many are not even actually executable. And I'll give you a few examples. But whether amendments to the IT rules, Apar and I was just talking about that today. There have been several challenges, and there have been several stays granted because many of these legislations are very clumsily drafted. And I just like to pull out a bit and, look at the macro picture and where this comes from. This comes from bad faith policy. The idea of policy has to be that it is in good faith to create an infrastructure or an architecture that is a good for the industry, but doesn't
mm,
violate any rules or laws, uh, does job creation, which is a lot more than what this government has been able to do in its term, um, attract investment. None of the policy interventions have done any of that. Each time they announce a policy, 10 people shut down, investors leave the country, no one wants to touch media, etc., etc. And Indian media, where we have 21 or 22 official languages,
yeah.
is each of these language markets is the size of a country in Europe. Until 2015, we used to get unsolicited calls from investors saying we want to come in, start something in Malayalam, Tamil, Bengali. So now I'll give you an example of when they had the three-tier mechanism of grievance redressal, which
Yes.
also has been stayed as Apar, he knows the technical aspects better. In that, there was one interaction that happened, and of course, the bureaucrats who deal with this are very polite, etc. In that, there was one bit where it said if anyone is aggrieved and feels that there is defamation or they have been wrong, they can go to this three-tier mechanism. So I, as luck would have it, have two defamation cases News Laundry has from, believe it or not, media organizations.
Yes.
Of course, one of them has lost and appealed. But I said, so if it's being heard in the High Court and a few bureaucrats and also that organization appeals through this three-tier mechanism and reaches your, 5 bureaucrats or whatever that team is, and they say it's defamation, the High Court says no, are you going to overrule the High Court?
Mm,
They said, actually, we didn't think of that. We will relook at this. So you actually put out a policy where you didn't even think that 4 bureaucrats, as per your rule, could overrule a High Court or even a Supreme Court for that matter, because that's where defamation is fought. Now, that happens when, okay, and another matter, how many websites are there in India? Thousands. There's thousands of channels like yours. One committee in the INB ministry. I mean, if someone wants to overwhelm you, and I know I have a friend who runs a web channel, and they had a lot of complaints come in once because it was organized on Twitter. They
mm,
couldn't even deal with them. Luckily, they were so clumsily drafted, it didn't matter. But can you imagine if we acted in bad faith and said, everybody has complained against us and everybody escalated to the INB ministry level? Do they have enough personnel to even deal with
yeah.
100 complaints, let alone 10,000? So the policy hasn't been actually thought through that if this would happen, can we deal with it? Because the idea is not can we deal with it. The idea is if I don't like Faye, if I don't like Apar, if I don't like Abhinandan, I'll shut them down. The other 10,000 complaints I don't have to deal with. I
Mm,
will deal with what I want to deal with. Because if, let's say, and like I said, I think it is highly unlikely that this would stand any sort of test on legality. But even if this were hypothetically to go through, are you telling me that they have the manpower, a government that cannot even process an application for a pension card in time, they have the capacity to deal with not thousands, hundreds of thousands of such applications? Obviously, they don't because it's not in good faith. And when
mm.
you have policy not made in good faith, it will always be bad for everybody, including them. They just don't know it yet.
Apart, there's also confusion about whether every single influencer on the internet right now, the non-news influencers, so doctors who are putting out advice on Instagram, for example, people doing, travel stuff, chefs who are cooking, anyone who's using their specific skill to create content. Will all of these people also be now regulated by this broadcast bill? Will they now have to register with the government, set up a committee to actually check all their content before it goes, before it gets uploaded? Is that how this will work?
Yes, uh, it does say that. And I know this sounds preposterous, but this is what the law is saying. And I'll just refer to certain clauses. Under Section 2(1)BB, which is a definition within the Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill of 2024, the unofficial copy,
Mm.
it states that programs other than news and current affairs made available on demand or live through a website, social media intermediary, or any other online forum as part of a systematic business, professional, or commercial activity constitutes as a broadcaster when there is any kind of curation. And then curation basically means and is defined under the law as any selection, organizing, presentation of online content or information using skill, experience, or expert knowledge. Now, people may ask, what if I'm not running my business online? What if I have, let's say, a shop to sell garments like sarees, and I just have a YouTube channel where I show what kind
Yeah,
of
show the
sarees are
product.
there?
Yeah.
All of you fall within it because usually laws have limiting criterias. For instance, phrases such as a person who does full time curation, only engaged in that. So it's not only your big influencers having following of millions, or those who do it primarily and having big teams putting out 5 videos which are very
Mm.
well edited. It's also the people who have that small little YouTube channel where they review a sari, they talk about food, the kind of examples you mentioned, Faye. Now, of course, the government will say that we will place certain thresholds and we will exempt people who are, let's say, not having a certain number of subscribers or viewers. But this is not how the internet works. Suppose some person puts up a, video of, I'll go back to the example of food, okay, anything relating to, let's say, a vada pav or a samosa, and somebody else takes a clip of it and posts it on another social media platform and it goes viral. All of a sudden, that small person who has a small following on YouTube becomes a broadcaster because they have a X number of views or Y number of views. So I think this entire law is irrational, it's preposterous, but it's a very real proposal which is being faced by digital news platforms, but also online creators.
Also, just have one question for Apar. Is there a
Yeah.
circularity in laws? Suppose Mr. Modi's channel or Twitter account where he posts stuff and videos on. So, will the PM also have to constitute a little committee, and who will? And they will have to report to someone in his ministry. I mean, how does it work? Because everyone's social media. Because even he pillows gyan about all sorts of stuff and gives videos about what's happening. So, and
Yeah.
also in the previous law, news has still not been defined. I mean, I don't know if they've defined it here. So, would it work that with everyone with a social media following or a YouTube channel, including our cabinet ministers, will also
Provided,
have?
I'm assuming the ministry doesn't exempt them, but the ministry has given itself the power to exempt whoever it chooses.
So it's a little it's a little confusing the way this law is designed. It first says that a public authority, which includes the prime minister's office or maybe
Mm.
even a chief minister, okay, cannot operate a broadcasting service. So it says that you cannot, just like, a state government can't open a TV channel, okay, which is prohibited under the law. It says you can't open a broadcasting service unless we exempt you. And if we exempt you for social purpose, then you can come and register with us. But the default is you can't even broadcast as a service if you are even an employee and a public official working for the government. So this is there even in the earlier draft, which has been released officially on the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting's website and was put to public consultation last year in November. The Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill of 2023, which was an earlier proposal. So the government is saying basically nobody can run a broadcasting service if they are a public authority. We will exempt the kind of public authorities, and that exemption is not from registration. That allows you to set up something, but first you have to come and then seek permission from us also. So it's a double whammy.
But
I think the logic is coming across clearly now. I hope people are understanding what I'm trying to convey.
so, Abhinandan, do you agree that the manner in which this has been drafted and the draft that we're looking at right now, so much has been left open to interpretation and open to interpretation in the future that there is an ill intent there to selectively target or selectively harass certain people?
Yeah, unfortunately, that has become a trend with governance in our country. That the idea is to keep it as vague as possible, so you have the discretion of using it how you want. In fact,
Hmm.
this was even true for this now struck down Section 66A of the IT Act, where they had words like annoyance and all. I mean, it was just so discretionary, that they could arrest who they wanted. So and that too was drafted by some very sound legal minds. So I think the idea of keeping it vague is so that they can exercise the discretion, or they can shut down who they want, give permission to who
Hmm.
they want. And which goes back to, if you just see the trend of any policy intervention in the media space since 2017-18, since that first press conference of Piyush Goyal on FDI, every subsequent amendment and legislation is designed to kill media,
Hmm.
not to create a ecosystem that can actually create jobs in tech, in content, in design. There's so much it can be done, but it has been designed to do exactly the opposite. Which is why I always say, whenever sometimes there are these discussions and there are these panel discussions and little huddles with all the affected parties and stakeholders, I was like, as step one, can we just come with in good faith? That is the
Hmm.
starting point. Because if I'm not coming in good faith, what is the point of all that consultation and tamjam and tamasha?
Here's the thing, Abhinandan, this question was asked to me by a couple of people saying, oh, is this because the government blames its losses in the election on the digital media guys? And is this a knee jerk reaction because of that? Do you believe that to be true?
Absolutely. I think there is absolutely no doubt. I think everything is knee jerk. I just drove to Punjab a few weeks ago. They still have these things. Yeah, the farmers left when?
Hmm.
I mean, they have kept stuff there that whenever we want, we should be able to shut down whatever we want. This is not how government that is serving the people functions. So clearly, of course, they blame, because I mean, legacy media, it's a joke. I mean, several conferences I see people on panels talking about the fighting fake news, and their channels are leading on fake news. I'm like, dude, so if there's any chance of the citizen of this country getting any information that is halfway accurate and coming from a journalistic exercise, they only have digital left. They don't have broadcast. And in fact, even the term broadcast, maybe apart we should challenge that in court. It is not broadcast. We are webcast. So it's just so ad hoc. I think the response is purely knee jerk, based purely on what happened in the election, and they fear that as there is more and more, and you see now here's the double-edged sword. you know Mukesh Bhai would want more penetration in high, into every city and
Hmm.
small town and village through internet. Okay, great. That will, give him fantastic returns, and clearly policy is favoring his company a lot, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But once it gets in there and you have internet everywhere, then what goes on the internet also goes everywhere. Right now,
But
they have
you know,
control.
but Abhinandan, see, and Apar, I want you to clarify this for us. Is it true based on this brief and also the previous one that the mainstream corporate media guys, so the TV channels and the newspapers, provided they're putting out the same thing that has already been put on the TV and on newspaper, they're not regulated by this atrocious bill?
Only e-replica of newspapers are exempted, which means that what's published and is available in print and delivered on your doorstep by a newspaper, that e-replica copy which is available as a text article or as a PDF, that is exempted. But the TV guys, as well as the uh, uh, larger media conglomerates which have doing original, any kind of original reporting. So even if you have a copy which has the same press report, and I know a lot of newspapers put a smaller press report in print and a larger press report online because there's more space there, okay? So they would fall under this law. This law's ambit only excludes e-replica newspapers, and that's because they are regulated by the press regulation, the PNRB, Press and News Regulation Act. And
Hmm.
the issue, the thing which we need to remember is that, of course, this bill is targeting the independent news platforms, the digital news publishers, people like you, Faye, people like News Laundry, and so many others. And there's a large audience which is craving that kind of independent, non-partisan, critical media which asks the tough questions to people in power. But here's the thing as well, this is also going to hurt the corporate guys. And I'm not going to speak up for them extensively, except to say that when the consultation was held last year in November, several of these provisions were also questioned by them as to their feasibility. So their industry associations criticized,
Hmm.
saying that this is excessive regulation. And let's just imagine if large media conglomerates are saying that this will be too costly and we'll
Yeah,
find it difficult to implement, what will happen to the smaller
the little
independent
guys. Yeah,
outfits?
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and this is what I find the content evaluation committee, where
Yeah.
basically anyone who's not doing news. So you could be an influencer who is putting out travel content, food content, making noodles, whatever it is. You will have to, based on this law, set up a content evaluation committee of people who are experts in women's rights and child rights and caste issues, and they have to approve every piece of content before it
Yes.
gets uploaded. How is
Yes.
that
That
even
is.
possible? Who's thinking about up this stuff?
This is a censor board. So, Faith, this is a censor board approach where any kind of content is certified to be legal, which is a kind of a pre-censorship, as they say in the law, right? And of course, this excludes within itself news and current affairs. But as I was giving an example yesterday in a press conference organized by DigiPub, a news and current affairs broadcaster like you, Faye, or like News Laundry also does a travel vlog sometimes, right? So you will
Hmm.
need to constitute a content evaluation committee. Now let's presume that Faye and Abhinandan have three friends who want to work for free, see all of their videos, and give these certificates. These certificates have to be maintained both by Faye and Abhinandan, which brings up documentation and archival
Yeah.
costs. Perpetually, you have to maintain it till the video is there online. There's no limitation. And here's the kicker, any kind of state authority, not only the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, but also any state government, any thana can ask you and say that, hey, we have received a complaint against that video or this video. Do you have a CEC? Give us a copy of the certificate. And then
Yeah.
the thana has the name of not only does not only have that certificate, it has the name and the addresses and all the details of your three friends who were there in the CEC. So I don't think so our friends will agree to be in the CEC. And
Yes.
one
No, but
last
also
thing I want to.
it can't be your
Yeah,
friends because it says the government needs to be happy with the qualification of this
yes,
individual to be on your
yes,
CSC.
yes. So the government
So
also
I
needs
want
to
to
be
know
your
how
friend.
many women's rights activists are there in the country. If there needs to be one on every single CC, which means every single influencer will have to have one of these on their panels.
Yes. So three short things I want to say. This
Yes.
makes it very evident that these are kind of compliances which are impossible to comply. And when you have a law which applies to virtually everyone, and the compliance is very, very difficult, which happens in our cities with respect to municipal permits. What happens? The person who does not pay off the person who's come to inspect, or if you challenge somebody, it's then when the bulldozer comes to your house. Okay, so this is a form of law which is so onerous to comply, virtually nobody can do it. And because nobody can do it, the government gets to pick and choose the people it will be enforced against. One final thing, as I was saying earlier, the government will say again and again, this is all self-regulation. We are asking Faye and Abhinandan to constitute a CEC because this will make sure that everything which will be put by them on YouTube will be legally compliant. Okay. And
Yeah.
this is a kind of thing which is done globally. The difference is that globally, when any kind of self assessment is done, the law does not require it. It actually contravenes the normal dictionary meaning of self regulation, which means I regulate myself if the law requires you to do it, and if you don't do it, there's a penalty enforced on you. So they have just used
Yeah,
words which
that's not
sound nice.
self-regulation.
Yeah, this is not self-regulation. This is mandatory, coercive regulation, which
Yeah.
comes with penalties. And there's so much to unpack in this bill. I just
Yeah.
hope that more people look at it in greater detail,
Yeah.
because this is a threat to not only, let's say, you or Abhinandan. This is a threat to even people who enjoy going to those meme channels and meme pages, okay, where which actually, I think so, fosters a lot of what online discourse is about today.
In fact, Abhinandan, when those of us who do run businesses, news or content that is digital, there's GST filings to be done, there are tax filings to be done, there's a lot of compliance to already do. And now, on top of that, this is a lot of paperwork that Apar, in his opinion, his expertise, is telling us it's impossible to do. So, is the process here the punishment? Are they just trying to make it, just simply unviable to run these businesses anymore?
Absolutely. They have already been trying that for a long time, including the tax raids that I was subjected to, and 13 hours of questioning. And, then they have done that with several people. And even that isn't yielding the expected results. So they're coming up with stuff like this. And, Faye, just to point out one little thing, again, it goes back to what is the purpose. I don't know if you've seen enough people talking about, oh, we have done this so that there's level playing field. We have done this because there's level playing field
Yes,
between
yes.
broadcast. Have they thought that you and I pay 18% GST? Print doesn't. Their
Mm.
subscription is no GST at all. So you see, there is no level playing field. Jab chaho, then this is a level playing field. But when you actually see who's paying how much GST where, then there's no level playing field. Here they also know there should be level playing field. But when it comes to actual FDI, there is no level playing field. So it is just completely. I can get these guys by the blockade. Like I remember, I had quoted on one show. I had gone to the INB Ministry website and seen in the last 10 or 15 years all the orders for blocking channels. Some channels blocked for 8 days, some for 1 hour, some for. And I was going through it. It was laughable. I mean, I don't know if that link is still there. It's a PDF. So, your audience should go check out on the INB Ministry website. The
Mm.
amount of things that they block. Now that they can do because of the Cable Television Act, because you have to purchase a license, and they
Yeah.
can say, oh, you're using uplinking, downlinking. That is a resource. It's a public resource. You have to pay for it. To internet, I'm not paying public resource. Yeah. Why should I seek any license from you? Next, you'll say you have to seek a license from me if I want to breathe. You want to. You. I mean, on the contrary, you have done nothing to improve the quality of air. So it is just a question of whatever they seem is not in their control, they want to control. And it is just that. It is that single-minded blinders. It has nothing to do with the larger framework of how the industry will respond to this, how the market will respond to this, how job creation will be impacted. Nothing. That is not anywhere close to the parameters which they apply when they're actually legislating this. It is only how do we shut this person down, how do we shut that person
Mm.
down. When you have a destructive mindset, which is the starting point of your legislation, you will come up with clumsy, terrible things like this.
I mean, let's be honest, we've all watched television news, some of us more closely than others from the inside and then from the outside over the last 7 years. We've seen them systematically remove anybody who asked questions of power from TV news till a point where it is now completely benign. It has absolutely no teeth. Its teeth have been extracted systematically over the last 5 years. They have now arrived with their dentist tongs to digital news. And this is now the attempt that is being carried out. Apart, we have someone on our chat window who's saying, what are the penalties if a private, if a sort of content creator doesn't follow the rules?
So there
Including
are two.
seizing of equipment, right? Which is like this little round light and my laptop, they will come and take everything. That's part of the law.
So I looked at the seizure provision. For some reason, Faye, they have not extended it to broadcasters. It's only on networks. But the inspecting officer, which is not defined, the government is going to tell who's the inspecting officer. They can still come and say to you or to Abhinandan that show us how do you make these videos, where do you store this data, show us all the information about your subscribers. So it's going to have a chilling effect. All that stuff is there. I think just in terms of the penalties, what the government is trying to do is that it's come out with two schedules. The first schedule has fines and criminal offenses with punishments up to 2 years, and repeat offenses are terms of imprisonment up to 5 years. And that's primarily for when you operate any kind of broadcasting service, which means a content creator as well as a digital news platform, without registering with the government. Or if you register, you do not provide the correct details. I'll just pause here because a lot of pseudonym accounts also run large followings on, let's say, Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter, because they come from marginalized communities. They come from spaces and they talk about issues which are frankly risky. And they may not want to give their full name, address, and possibly their Aadhaar number to the government, right? Now, there is the second schedule. The second schedule is basically containing penalties when you do not follow what is called as the program code. The program code will be determined ultimately by the Ministry of Information Broadcasting. You can forget all this self-regulation. That's just a compliance burden. Ultimately, the Ministry of Information Broadcasting is going to decide whether, quote unquote, your program or this program is in good taste. Whether I said something, quote unquote, ironical. These are all phrases within the program code which can be used by the Ministry of Information Broadcasting to today levy fines on television channels. But they can do that also if this proposal passes into law for any kind of content creator, any kind of digital news broadcaster, and then they can levy financial penalties. And also, if there are multiple penalties, they can revoke your registration even if you're registered. And then if you go on and you still broadcast without your registration, then you go to jail. So I think so. It's a very tight knot which is there between these two schedules in terms of penalties for non-compliance.
Abhinandan, we did talk about the cost of compliance here, but there's also, I mean, the chilling effect that will happen because digital, as we talked about, digital news producers are the only ones still bringing up the important details, asking the questions, sort of holding government accountable, although government refuses to give us interviews in any way. Will there be a chilling effect as well where people be like, okay, you know what? I feel like I'm being watched a little more. There's a possibility of shutting us down, possibility of taking down videos. So I'm just going to not ask questions.
Actually, I think this is in response to the reverse happening. I mean, it could be anecdotal. I mean, there's no quantifiable way to measure this, but at least over the last 2 or 3 years, I've noticed people who weren't even speaking up earlier have started speaking up. Several people that I have known personally for decades, who had their heart in the right place. They believed in journalism and what it stands for and what it should do. Were really quiet, and many of them, and in fact, many people who are in service, who work for the government, who just wouldn't speak up. I mean, I don't know whether you heard, but when the day of the result came out of the election, I don't know whether you had some friends of yours at the BJP office. within earshot of journalists, there were some BJP leaders who were within earshot saying that this is what happens when you just have an election photo of one man. Like, they would never dare to say that even out
Dare say
loud.
it. Mm.
So if people are saying that within earshot of other journalists, okay, they're not saying it on air. But earlier, you could not get anyone to say anything that Mr. Modi done anything bad. So clearly, people are speaking up. So I think this is a panic response to the opposite of chilling effect happened, because chilling effect jitna hona tha ho gaya. With
Mm.
the putting people in jail, arresting people, say, okay, now this is not working anymore. So this is in response. So if anything, this is basically to give them the power to shut it down, because there is no more chilling effect happening. We are all chilled as much as could be chilled. Now the opposite of chilling is happening.
The other question I had for you is, of course, we are part of DigiPub, we have a lot of young content creators who are doing news in different languages from different parts of the country. They have small audiences, they're focused on their audience. There are people doing news only on tribal issues. There are people doing news only on caste issues. There are people covering only Coimbatore, for example. How
Yeah.
will they continue to, first of all, this is entire conversation is happening in English in Mumbai, Delhi. It's not even including people from other languages. What happens to the smaller news producers or the smaller content producers from tier 2, tier 3 India?
They don't grow. There is no seeding of entrepreneurship so that they can then become bigger and bigger and bigger. And maybe 2 generations later, it is not, the Jains and the Puris and all running these things, but there are people who are more accomplished, more educated, and more sensible running it. So you don't seed any entrepreneurship. Okay, so that dies. And also, little things, like one simple thing, and I have gone for conferences, and I have asked this question for experts, because I mean, I'm sure you pay GST, and we have to, before GST you had to pay that cess and Yamuna
Yeah.
cess and this cess, and till a point you could pay it by check. Now you have to do it online, digitally. Half time the server, sometimes the server is not working. I always used to wonder, how do people in Kashmir run a business? How do people in Manipur run a business? When the internet is shut down for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you cannot file any of the filings that you have to do online.
Yeah.
How are people running businesses? They clearly are not. And I never got an answer, because there is no provision that yaar exception karke check le lo. I mean, because sometimes when the server's not working and I have to travel, I tell my accountant, I say, just take a check. They said, no, we have to file online. I was like, okay, then how do people in Kashmir and Manipur do it? I don't have an answer. No one. So I don't think, see, policymakers don't care. They're saying, who can we control? How that finishes an industry or not is irrelevant. It is all about control. Those who they can control through government ads, they do. Those who they can control through intimidation, they do. Now, those who are left, which is why I said the chilling effect is not happening anymore. Now, those who are left, this is for them.
Apar, you were nodding. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think when you think about the economic impact of this, a lot of the conversation in the popular media and press is about the impact it will have on creativity and the kind of shows you will not get to watch on Netflix, Amazon Prime. And I voiced it as well. That kind of chilling has happened, Faye.
Yeah.
But I think like it's impacted the kind of shows which are getting commissioned, and that's very, very public. There are investigative stories, there are public statements, there are creators like Dipankar Banerjee who are saying that we have shows ready which are not being aired. That kind of economic harm has happened. But if one understands the structure of this law, I think it comes with a very careless, reckless disregard for the economic opportunity the internet provides to the little person, to the person who wants to put up videos about repairing small electronic items like an air conditioner and gets business from a small locality. You basically place so many compliances on that person, right? And you also require social media companies to check those compliances. You've outsourced all that, and you've placed the cost of that on that small individual to do that, who cannot navigate this maze any longer. This forces a formalization of the informal MSME sector. Let's acknowledge today that one of the great benefits which have happened in the last few years has been the economic participation due to the internet. There's so many people who run small businesses, eateries, small
Hmm.
support services, blue collared workers who've done well for themselves because they have a brand presence they've built online, right? And here, Faye, through the formalization, only the people who are big, the conglomerates can exist because they can comply. It kills off the MSME sector. I think we are not understanding it. Not only
Yeah.
attacks a creator or digital news publisher, it attacks a lot of the MSME businesses which need online presence today to interact with their users and the general public.
So,
So
when you talk about entrepreneurship, I do know that the big guys, Google and YouTube, for example, consider being a YouTuber or a content producer on YouTube a form of entrepreneurship. It's part of their entire plan to grow the space in India. The same with Meta. They want more and more people to create content and put it up on their platforms. How can this be something that they accept? Because it will also kill their business model. So, do you
So
expect, that these platforms will use their considerable, excuse me, strength to go up against government and say, "Hey, this is not okay. We can't function like this," or are they going to just roll over and say, "Fine"?
see, Faye, I've explained this and I've dealt with this issue several times in which I've stated that India has about 900 million active smartphone connections and provides very low revenue per user, but a very large user base for a lot of the social media companies and online intermediaries. And their business model is serving ads by gathering more data, but also gathering that personal data towards enriching any kind of product innovation, which also includes now AI models, right? So they need to maintain market presence in India. We need to view all these kind of companies as corporations which are operating in a country, may to a certain extent defend their business interest, but their larger business interest is maintaining market presence. So the government is acting like a bully, right? It is an incorrect expectation to hold from a transnational corporation which is listed and reports shareholder revenues to shareholders for its stock prices, that it will fight the government. They will fight the government, but I think if we are hoping that Google will do it or Facebook will do it, or if we go by their corporate PR speak that they are doing it, we are having an incorrect expectation from a corporation which wants to make money and will only fight for its business interest till the extent that it can survive in a country.
and the incentives have to be lined up, Faye, with what are the
Yeah.
outcomes that you want. I mean, if you
Hmm.
just do an what are the incentives, how they lined up against what outcomes you want, it makes all the policy interventions very clear. Now, the rhetoric is digital India, digital India. मैंने देखा ऐसे कर रहा था और मुझे idea. So clearly, with, as Apar pointed out, there being such an overwhelming burden of compliance on the small YouTuber or a small, I think the idea of sell pakoras was not an idea. It was not a suggestion, it was an instruction. Because digital India ain't happening. Just go set up pakoda store because that is all you can do. Because I am shutting down digital India. So clearly there is the option, but to do that for all of us at some point.
So sell the pakoras, but do not make a video of how to
Yeah,
make
yeah, but we
pakoras, because
don't
that is
don't
also
put
gone.
a YouTube of it. Just stay offline. That digital
Is
India,
there,
stay offline.
Abhinandan, is there any country outside of China that regulates or chills down digital content in this manner?
Well, Bangladesh did recently, just
Yeah.
last week, they had shut down internet all across the country.
No, but that was a
Pakistan,
curfew. We're not in a curfew.
They
yeah,
have a
but
Arguably.
security act. There are former Soviet countries. There's Turkey. So it's
Pakistan has done it with certain frequency. Of course, there's North Korea. I'm sure there are several
China.
others.
China has a
But
security law. A lot of
they don't have
countries.
a firewall. You can't. But the thing is that India still has the highest number of internet shutdowns. So we're still a leader there.
Hmm. Hmm.
On that, we are number one in the world.
Also, not great company to be in, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's not.
So, Abhinandan, is there anything you want to ask Apar before we wrap this up? Any
There's
other
too many
points
things
you
I
want to?
want to ask him. I have to get on him with get on the call with him offline.
All
Faye, I
right,
would just like to mention one thing for
please.
people who, because there's a lot of awareness which needs to be developed around this law. I have prepared over the past week. I've studied the different provisions. I've put across a 18-page handout, and I know that's a lot of punishment, but for lawyers and policy professionals,
Yeah.
especially people who are a little much more inclined towards that, want to understand the proposal in a little much more detail. It's available online on my social media channels. I would encourage people to engage with the draft, to look at it, and to consider the kind of impact it's having. It's very, very broad ranging, and it comes across clearly on the basis of the provision and the analysis.
Absolutely. So take a look at Apar's Twitter handle. You'll find it right there. It's an entire sort of debriefed handout on this bill that's extremely complicated. To put it in a nutshell, though, what the government has done is decided that it's now time to roll up the sleeves and get into digital news and find out what the kids are doing there and make them stop. So what they're doing effectively is they've written a law. If it passes, will stop the way you are receiving news on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, what's getting published on the internet, what's getting shared on the internet, any sort of websites that you like to read. All of this will come under regulation. Besides that, all of the content that you're watching from the on the OTT platforms, on the non-news platforms, and the non-news creators will also get regulated to a point where it will become impossible to freely share or put up content. You have to be involved in this because it really does affect you. We're going to put out more and more content about this because we want people to understand the real sort of scope of what the government plans to do with this extremely ill-intentioned bill from what it looks like. And we do hope that the government will, in the very least, take suggestions from those of us whose way of life and living will be completely shut down by this bill, which they have not done up till now. They have only consulted the really, really big guys with a lot of money, and they've done so quietly and secretly, suggesting even more that this is ill-intentioned and this is not something they mean to bring in public consultation on. Apar Gupta and Abhinandan Sekhri, thank you for the work that both of you do. And thank you for joining us this evening and answering those questions. It's a pleasure. For our audience, please read more about the broadcast bill. We need your support. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, Faye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Faye.